My name is Evelina. I'm 29 years old, and right now I'm packing 7 years of my life into a cardboard box. The family photo on my desk seems to mock me as I wrap it in newspaper. My parents built this construction company from nothing, and I've been here since college working my way up from the bottom. But none of that matters anymore because my golden boy brother Marcus just returned from Europe, and they fired me to make room for him. Before I share what happened that destroyed everything I built, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I grew up knowing I would never be enough. It didn't matter that I brought home straight A's while Marcus barely passed his classes. It didn't matter that I spent every weekend helping at the construction sites while he stayed home playing video games. In my parents' eyes, their son could do no wrong, and their daughter, well, I was just there. When I was 10 years old, my parents started their construction company with one truck and a dream. They worked 18-hour days, bid on every small project they could find, and slowly built their reputation in the industry. I watched them pour everything into that business, and somewhere along the way I decided I wanted to be part of it too. By 14, I was spending my summers in the office filing paperwork and answering phones. The construction workers would laugh when they saw me, this skinny teenager trying to understand blueprints and building codes. But I kept showing up. I learned how to read architectural plans, how to calculate material costs, how to negotiate with suppliers. I absorbed everything like a sponge because I thought if I worked hard enough, my parents would finally see me. Marcus took a different path. While I was learning about concrete grades and load-bearing walls, he was at art school in Paris finding himself. My mother would show everyone his abstract paintings, talking about his sensitive soul and creative genius. When relatives asked about me, she'd say I was doing fine at the company, like it was some kind of consolation prize. In college, I studied business management with a focus on construction and real estate. Every professor told me I had natural talent for strategic planning and financial analysis. I graduated summa cum laude and had offers from 3 major firms, but I turned them all down. I wanted to work for my family's company. I wanted to prove I belonged there. My first day as an official employee wasn't what I expected. Despite being the owner's daughter, my father started me at the bottom. I was assigned to the equipment yard, checking inventory and scheduling maintenance. The workers tested me constantly, giving me the worst jobs to see if I'd complain or use my family connection to get out of them. I never did. I showed up at 5 a.m. every day, worked until dark, and earned their respect inch by inch. Within 2 years, I knew every employee by name, their kids' names, their stories. George, our chief engineer, became my unofficial mentor. He was 60 years old, with 40 years of experience, and he taught me things no textbook ever could. He showed me how to spot potential problems before they became disasters, how to handle difficult clients, how to keep projects on schedule and under budget. Amy joined the company around the same time I did. She started in accounting, but quickly proved she had skills beyond spreadsheets. We became best friends, supporting each other through the casual sexism of construction sites and the exhausting politics of family business. She was the only person who really understood what it was like to constantly prove yourself in an industry that doubted you before you even opened your mouth. By my 5th year, I had personally secured 3 major city contracts worth over $20 million combined. I restructured our bidding process, which increased our win rate by 60%. I implemented new project management software that reduced delays by 30% and saved us hundreds of thousands in overtime costs. Our profits increased by 40% during my tenure, and I had documentation to prove my direct involvement in every improvement. But whenever I presented these achievements to my parents during quarterly reviews, they would nod politely and attribute the success to market conditions or team effort. My father would say things like, "The economy is strong right now, everyone's doing well." My mother would add that our wonderful employees really stepped up. They never said I stepped up. They never said I made the difference. Then came the company holiday party last December. We'd rented out the ballroom at the Grand Plaza Hotel, and all 200 employees were there with their families. I was in the middle of discussing next year's expansion plans with our senior managers when my father clinked his glass for attention. He announced that Marcus was finally coming home from Europe and would be joining the company as vice president of operations, the same position I'd been working toward for 7 years. The room went silent. I felt everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. I forced myself to smile and clap along with everyone else, even as my chest felt like it was caving in. George found me later that night on the hotel balcony. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at the city lights. Finally, he said, "Sometimes parents see what they want to see, not what's really there." I asked him if it ever gets easier watching less qualified people get handed what you earned. He said no, but you learn to build your own path anyway. When I confronted my mother the next day, she brushed off my concerns. "Marcus needs to learn the family business," she said. "You'll help him get settled, won't you? You've always been so good at the details." When I pointed out that I had an MBA and 7 years of experience while Marcus had a degree in contemporary art, she actually laughed. "Don't be jealous of your brother, Evelina. It's unbecoming." I should have seen what was coming, but I still believed that merit would eventually win. I thought if I just kept working hard, kept delivering results, they would have to acknowledge my value. I was wrong. Marcus arrived on a Monday morning in January, wearing a $3,000 Italian suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had probably never held anything more substantial than a lunch reservation list. He walked through the office like he owned it, which technically he would someday, shaking hands and flashing that charismatic smile that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. My father gave him the corner office, the one with views of the city skyline that I'd been promised 3 years ago but never received. He introduced Marcus to our biggest clients over expensive lunches while I handled the actual work back at the office. My mother redecorated his space with modern art and designer furniture, while my office still had the same metal desk from the 80s. His first week was a disaster that I spent covering up. He confused architectural blueprints with abstract art, asking our lead architect why the building design looked so conventional. He told our biggest concrete supplier that we should explore more sustainable alternatives, not realizing we'd already spent 2 years developing the most eco-friendly mix in the industry, which I had personally negotiated and implemented. During a safety meeting, he suggested we relax some protocols to speed up productivity. George had to explain that those protocols were federal requirements, not suggestions, and violating them could shut down our entire operation. Marcus laughed it off, saying he was just thinking outside the box, while our safety manager looked like he was about to have a heart attack. But the real problem started when he began sitting in on my meetings. I'd spent 6 months preparing for a potential partnership with Yamamoto Construction, a Japanese firm looking for an American partner for a $50 million project. I'd studied their business culture, learned basic Japanese phrases, researched their past projects, and built a presentation that addressed every concern they might have. The morning of the meeting, Marcus decided to join us. He showed up 15 minutes late, interrupting my opening presentation to introduce himself. He bowed, incorrectly used informal language with the senior executives, and kept checking his phone during their questions. When Mr. Yamamoto mentioned their commitment to precision and punctuality, Marcus actually said that Americans were more flexible and creative, implying their methods were outdated. I watched years of relationship building start to crumble. Speaking in Japanese, I apologized for the interruption and explained that Marcus was new and still learning our protocols. I smoothly redirected the conversation back to our proposal, emphasizing our company's respect for their methods and our perfect safety record, which exceeded even their strict standards. I spent the next 2 hours salvaging the meeting, answering every technical question while Marcus sat there looking at his phone. We got the contract, but barely. Mr. Yamamoto pulled me aside afterward and said in English that he appreciated my professionalism and cultural awareness. He also said very diplomatically that he hoped future meetings would be more focused. I knew what he really meant, that Marcus had almost cost us everything. That evening, my parents called us both into their office. I expected them to address Marcus's behavior, maybe even thank me for saving the deal. Instead, my mother gushed about how impressive Marcus was, how his international perspective really added value to the meeting. My father said Marcus brought a fresh energy that clients obviously responded to. When I started to object to explain what actually happened, they dismissed me. Don't be petty, Evelina. Success is a team effort. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Marcus would make mistakes, I would fix them, and he would take credit for the solutions. When he miscalculated material costs for the Riverside project costing us potentially $100,000, I spent a weekend renegotiating with suppliers to offset the loss. On Monday, he presented my solution to our parents as his cost-saving initiative. The employees started noticing. George would shake his head whenever Marcus spoke in meetings. Amy began documenting everything, keeping copies of emails and project reports that showed who really did the work. Other department heads started coming to me directly, bypassing Marcus entirely, even though he technically outranked me. One afternoon, Amy pulled me into the supply closet, a habit we developed for sharing confidential information. She'd been processing payroll and discovered Marcus was making 3 times my salary, plus a signing bonus, plus a company car, plus an expense account that he used for personal shopping. I made $60,000 a year after 7 years of 60-hour weeks. He made $180,000 for showing up late and creating problems. The worst part was watching him leave at 3 p.m. every day for long lunches or golf games with his friends, while I stayed until midnight fixing his mistakes. He'd post pictures on Instagram from exclusive clubs and restaurants, tagging them as networking for business development, while I ate takeout at my desk, actually developing our business. The breaking point came when I overheard my parents in the conference room. The door was slightly open, and they were discussing the succession plan with their lawyer. My father said Marcus would need about 2 more years to be ready for CEO. My mother agreed, adding that I could stay on as COO to handle the actual operations while Marcus would be the face of the company. They talked about me like I was a useful tool, not their daughter. Not someone who'd given everything to build their dream. But the real shock came when I heard the lawyer ask about my position. My father's response chilled me to the bone. Evelina's great with details, but she doesn't have leadership presence. Clients and investors respond better to Marcus. We need someone who looks the part. My mother added that I could always stay in a supporting role, that I seemed happy working behind the scenes. Happy. They thought I was happy being invisible. 7 years of sacrifice of proving myself every single day, and they thought I was content being Marcus's shadow. I stood there in the hallway feeling something fundamental break inside me. George found me there an hour later, still frozen, still processing the betrayal. He guided me to his office, poured me coffee from his ancient thermos, and let me cry for the first time in years. Then he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the people who should see us most clearly are the ones most blind to our worth. That doesn't diminish your value, Evelina. It reveals their limitations. I worked the rest of that week in a fog, going through the motions while my mind raced with possibilities. Should I confront them? Should I quit? Should I try even harder to prove myself? Amy noticed my distraction and kept covering for me, fielding calls and handling minor issues while I struggled to focus. Friday afternoon, Marcus announced he wanted to modernize our operations. His big innovation was switching to a software system that we'd already been using for 3 years, the one I had selected and implemented. When I pointed this out, he said he wanted to optimize our current system, taking full credit for my work yet again. I realized then that this would never end. They would never see me. I would spend my entire career making Marcus look good while he collected the rewards. The family business I'd loved, the legacy I'd wanted to build, was never really mine. It was always his, just waiting for him to claim it. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a cold drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. I'd spent the weekend preparing for the quarterly board meeting, compiling reports that showed our strong performance despite Marcus's interference. Maybe if I presented the data clearly enough, showed the direct correlation between my work and our success, they would finally understand. I should have known something was wrong when HR called asking me to come to the conference room instead of the boardroom. When I walked in, my parents were there with our head of HR and 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. There was no warmth in their faces, just professional distance, like I was a problem to be solved. My father didn't even say good morning. He simply slid a folder across the table and said, "We need to talk about your future with the company." The words hit me like ice water. My mother sat there examining her manicure, avoiding eye contact entirely. The folder contained what they called a performance review, but it was nothing like the glowing evaluations I'd received for 7 years. This was a character assassination disguised as professional feedback. According to this document, I was difficult to work with, resistant to new leadership, and creating a hostile work environment for Marcus. They had emails taken completely out of context where I questioned Marcus's decisions or corrected his mistakes. They'd twisted my mentoring attempts into undermining his authority. A private conversation with Amy about my frustration had somehow been recorded and transcribed, presented as evidence of my negative attitude. When I asked who had compiled this review, my mother finally looked at me. "Marcus came to us with concerns about your behavior. Several employees have complained that you're making it difficult for him to implement his vision." The lies were so bold, so shameless, that I actually laughed. Not a single employee except Marcus would complain about me, and we all knew it. I pulled out my phone, ready to show them emails from department heads praising my work, thanking me for fixing Marcus's errors, begging me to stay strong despite the obvious favoritism. But the lawyer raised his hand. "We're not here to debate past performance. We're here to discuss a transition." The ultimatum was simple and cruel. I could resign immediately with 2 weeks of severance and a neutral reference, or be terminated for cause with nothing. If I chose termination, they would contest any unemployment claims and inform future employers about my performance issues. The lawyer pushed another document forward, a resignation letter they'd already written for me. I found my voice despite the shock. 7 years. I've been here 7 years. I built the systems you're using. I secured the contracts that keep us profitable. I trained half the staff. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. "You're destroying my career because Marcus wants my job." That's when the truth finally came out. My father leaned back in his chair and spoke with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never questioned his own biases. "Marcus is the future of this company. He needs to establish himself, and your presence undermines his authority. Clients and investors expect to see him in a senior role. It's nothing personal, Evelina. It's business. Nothing personal. Firing your daughter who built half your company is nothing personal." But I knew arguing was pointless. My mother finally spoke up, using that condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. "You're so talented with details, dear. You'll find something more suitable perhaps in a support role somewhere else. Marcus has even offered to write you a recommendation." That's when I learned the real reason for the urgency. Marcus's girlfriend, a woman named Brittany, who had no construction experience beyond choosing granite countertops for her condo, needed a job. My position, my office, my 7 years of blood and sweat were being handed to someone whose main qualification was dating my brother. I had one card to play. If I leave, who's going to handle the Yamamoto project? The technical specifications alone require someone who understands our systems. I'm the only one who knows their requirements. Marcus doesn't even know how to read the blueprints. My father waved his hand dismissively. "You'll train your replacement over the next 2 weeks. It's part of the transition agreement. If you refuse, you forfeit the severance and will pursue legal action for sabotaging company operations." I signed the resignation letter with hands that didn't feel like mine. They had me escort back to my office with HR watching as I packed my things. 7 years reduced to 3 cardboard boxes. My awards, my photos with the team, the coffee mug George gave me that said, "World's Okayest Boss," all of it loaded up like evidence of a life that no longer existed. The walk through the office was the hardest part. Word had already spread somehow. Amy was crying at her desk. George stood up from his chair, his face red with anger, ready to say something, but I shook my head. Other employees looked shocked, confused, some even scared. If they could do this to me, what job was safe? Security escorted me to the parking garage like I was a criminal. As the elevator descended, I heard Marcus laughing in the hallway above, probably already planning how to redecorate my office. The security guard Tom, who I'd known for 5 years, couldn't look me in the eye. He mumbled that he was sorry that this wasn't right. I told him it wasn't his fault. The next 2 weeks were torture. I came in early to train Brittany, who spent most of the time talking about her plans to modernize the office aesthetic. She didn't understand basic Excel formulas, confused suppliers with contractors, and asked if we really needed all these safety regulations. But she had long legs and a pretty smile, and apparently that qualified her for my job. During those 2 weeks, Amy secretly copied every important document she could access. George documented all of Marcus's mistakes that I'd fixed. Other employees started sending me private messages of support, some even hinting they were looking for new jobs. The company that my parents had spent 20 years building was fracturing, and they were too blind to see it. On my last day, there was no goodbye party, no thank you speech, just a security escort at 5 p.m. sharp. As I walked out for the last time, I turned back to look at the building. My parents were in Marcus's office, all three of them laughing at something on his computer screen, probably planning their brilliant future without me. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by those 3 cardboard boxes unemployment paperwork spread across my coffee table, wondering how I'd gotten everything so wrong. I'd played by their rules, worked harder than anyone, proved my worth over and over, and it meant nothing. Family was supposed to support you, not sacrifice you for their favorite child. But in that darkness, something else started to grow. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was anger. Clean, powerful, productive anger. They thought they'd buried me, but seeds get buried too, and seeds grow into something stronger. The first 3 days after my last day, I didn't leave my apartment. I ordered groceries online, ignored concerned texts from friends, and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My savings account had $50,000 accumulated through years of 60-hour weeks and skipped vacations. It would last me maybe a year if I was careful. But then what? The construction industry in our city was small. Everyone knew everyone. Word was already spreading about my departure from my family's company. I'd applied to 5 firms that first week, and 3 explicitly said they couldn't hire someone who'd been terminated from their own family's business. The other 2 never called back. Marcus apparently was making sure my reputation was thoroughly destroyed. Amy called me on Wednesday night, whispering that she'd overheard him on a conference call with another firm casually mentioning that I'd been let go due to personality conflicts and inability to adapt to changing leadership. He painted a picture of an emotional, difficult woman who couldn't handle her younger brother's success. The financial reality was sobering. My rent was $2,000 a month. Health insurance without employer coverage would be $800. Add utilities, food car payment, and basic expenses, and my savings would disappear fast. I spent hours creating budgets, calculating how long I could survive, wondering if I should sell my car, move to a cheaper apartment, or even leave the city entirely. Thursday brought an unexpected visitor. George stood at my door with a bottle of whiskey and a folder thick with papers. He didn't say anything at first, just poured us both drinks and spread the documents across my kitchen table. They were copies of emails, contracts, and internal memos showing exactly how badly Marcus was managing the Yamamoto project. In just 2 weeks, he'd made 3 critical errors that could void the entire contract. He'd approved substandard materials to save money, not realizing the specifications were legally binding. He'd missed 2 mandatory safety inspections, putting the company at risk of massive fines. Worst of all, he'd offended Mr. Yamamoto's representative by suggesting they were being too rigid about deadlines. George leaned back and said something that changed my perspective. Your parents are about to learn an expensive lesson about the difference between potential and performance. The question is whether you'll be around to watch or whether you'll be building something better. Friday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Helen Martinez, my grandmother, my mother's mother, calling from Arizona. She'd heard about what happened and wanted me to know that she wasn't surprised. Your mother always favored Marcus even as a baby. Some people can't see past their own preferences, mija. But that blindness doesn't diminish your light. She told me about her own experience, how she'd been pushed out of the family restaurant by her brothers, despite being the one who created all the recipes they still used. She'd started over at 50, opening a food truck that became a Phoenix institution. Sometimes rejection is redirection, she said. Sometimes the family that hurts you pushes you toward the family you choose. That weekend, I started researching, not job listings, but business law, specifically construction industry regulations and non-compete clauses. My employment contract had restrictions, but they were surprisingly narrow. I couldn't work for a direct competitor or solicit employees for 2 years, but consulting was a gray area. If I wasn't bidding on the same projects or stealing clients, I might have room to maneuver. Amy came over Sunday night with Chinese takeout and her laptop. She'd been documenting everything, not just Marcus's failures, but also all my contributions over the years. She had emails from clients specifically praising my work safety records, showing improvements I'd implemented, and financial data proving my direct impact on profitability. But more importantly, she had intelligence. 5 employees were actively job hunting. 3 major clients had expressed concern about Marcus's leadership. The Yamamoto project was in serious trouble, and my father was starting to panic. Without me there to quietly fix things, Marcus's incompetence was becoming impossible to hide. Monday morning, I woke up with a decision made. I wasn't going to beg for another corporate job. I wasn't going to accept being blacklisted. I was going to build something of my own, something they couldn't take away. The anger had crystallized into determination. They wanted me gone. Fine. I'd show them what gone really meant. I spent that week at the library researching business formation tax codes, insurance requirements. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in employment law and non-compete agreements. She reviewed my contract and confirmed what I'd suspected. Consulting work that didn't directly compete was legally permissible. As long as I didn't pursue their existing clients or active bids, I was free to operate. The name came to me during a late-night planning session. Phoenix Construction Consulting. Rising from the ashes seemed appropriate. I filed the LLC paperwork, registered for a business license, and opened a business bank account with $25,000 of my savings. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. George called me that Thursday with interesting news. He was considering early retirement, he said, though we both knew that was code. He couldn't stand working for Marcus and wanted out. But he also mentioned that 2 other senior engineers were in the same boat. They had decades of combined experience and were watching Marcus destroy everything they'd helped build. Friday brought the biggest surprise. My phone rang at 7 a.m. with an international number. It was Mr. Yamamoto himself calling from Tokyo. In carefully formal English, he expressed concern about the project's progress and asked if I was available for consulting work. He'd been very impressed with my understanding of their requirements and wondered if I might assist them directly. My heart raced as I explained my new consulting firm. He listened quietly, then said something that nearly made me cry. "Miss Evelina, we value competence and integrity over family politics. If you can ensure our project meets specifications, we would be honored to work with you." The contract he offered was worth more than my annual salary had been. It was primarily advisory, reviewing plans and ensuring compliance with their standards, which meant it didn't violate my non-compete. It was perfectly legal for me to help them succeed, even if that success exposed Marcus's failures. I accepted immediately and spent the weekend preparing my first report for Yamamoto Construction. As I worked, I realized something profound. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't trying to prove myself to anyone. I was simply doing excellent work because I could, because I wanted to, because it mattered to me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We heard you're struggling to find work. Marcus feels terrible. Perhaps you should consider moving back home until you figure things out." The condescension dripped from every word. They thought I was defeated, broken, dependent on their mercy. I didn't respond. Instead, I finalized my business registration, set up my website, and prepared for war. They wanted me gone. They were about to learn that sometimes the person you push away is the one holding everything together. And when that person builds something new, something better, well, that's not revenge. That's just business. 3 weeks into my new venture, I signed the lease for a small office space in the Meridian building directly across the street from my parents' company. It wasn't spite that made me choose that location, it was practicality. The rent was reasonable. The space was professional, and the view of their parking lot would remind me every day why I was doing this. The office was just 1,200 square feet, nothing compared to the sprawling floor I'd managed before, but it was mine. I spent a weekend painting the walls myself, assembling furniture from discount stores, and setting up 3 desks with the hope that I wouldn't be alone for long. George was my first official hire. Though hire isn't really accurate since he insisted on working for equity rather than salary initially. He brought 30 years of engineering expertise and, more importantly, connections throughout the industry. His resignation from my parents' company sent shockwaves. When someone of George's reputation walks away, people notice. Within days, 2 more engineers joined us both, taking significant pay cuts because they believed in what we were building. Amy couldn't leave immediately without arousing suspicion, but she fed us intelligence while secretly preparing her own exit. She told us Marcus had already lost a minor contract due to missed deadlines and was trying to hide it from my parents. The Japanese contract was our lifeline. I worked 18-hour days ensuring every specification was met, every concern addressed, every cultural consideration respected. Mr. Yamamoto appreciated the detailed reports, the proactive problem-solving, the fact that someone finally understood their exacting standards. He also appreciated that I never mentioned my family's company unless directly asked. The confrontation came sooner than expected. I was reviewing blueprints when my father called, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I explained calmly. That I was running a consulting firm perfectly legal under my non-compete agreement. His response was predictable. "You're trying to destroy us. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? You mean firing me to give my job to Marcus's girlfriend?" I kept my voice steady despite the rage bubbling underneath. "I'm not competing with you, Dad. I'm just trying to survive after you threw me away. If your business suffers, maybe look at who's running it instead of blaming the daughter you discarded." He threatened legal action, but I was prepared. My lawyer had already sent them a formal notice outlining my rights and their lack of grounds for any lawsuit. As long as I didn't solicit their clients or employees, they couldn't touch me. Of course, if employees chose to leave on their own, if clients chose to seek alternatives, well, that was just the free market at work. My mother called next, trying emotional manipulation instead of threats. "You're breaking my heart, Evelina. Families support each other. How can you do this to your brother?" The hypocrisy was staggering. "Families support each other. Like when you supported me by firing me. Marcus isn't my responsibility, Mom. He's yours. You chose him over me. Now live with that choice." 2 months in Phoenix Consulting was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. We had 4 full-time employees and 3 major contracts. The Yamamoto project alone was worth $700,000 over 6 months. Word spread that we delivered quality work on time without drama or ego. In construction, that reputation was gold. The real satisfaction came from doing things right. We implemented systems that prioritized safety and efficiency equally. We treated subcontractors with respect, paying them promptly and fairly. We created a work environment where expertise mattered more than politics, where good ideas could come from anyone, where nobody had to pretend mistakes weren't happening. Amy finally joined us as VP of Operations, bringing with her a flash drive containing years of documentation about my actual contributions to my parents' company. She also brought intelligence about their deteriorating situation. Marcus had made a catastrophic error on the Yamamoto project, approving concrete that didn't meet seismic requirements. The potential liability was in the millions. That evening my phone rang. It was my father again, but this time his voice had lost its anger. He sounded tired, desperate, defeated. "Evelina, we need your help. The Yamamoto project has complications. Marcus doesn't understand the technical requirements. We could lose everything." The words I'd waited years to hear, but they brought no satisfaction, only a hollow recognition of how unnecessary all this pain had been. I could have said no. Part of me wanted to watch them fail, to let them experience the consequences of their choices. But that wasn't who I was. I told him I would consider helping, but only under specific conditions. This would be a professional consultation at my standard rate, with a written contract acknowledging my expertise and contribution. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I arrived at my old office building wearing my best suit, flanked by George and Amy. The security guard who'd escorted me out 3 months earlier looked embarrassed as he waved us through. Employees stared as we walked past, some nodding in recognition, others quickly looking away. The conference room felt different from this side of the table. My parents looked older, stress diminished somehow. Marcus sat slouched in his chair, unable to meet my eyes. His girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, she'd quit after 2 weeks when she realized the job involved actual work. I opened my laptop and presented my analysis of their situation. It was worse than they knew. Marcus hadn't just bought the wrong concrete, he'd falsified inspection reports to cover it up. The legal ramifications could destroy the company. They had 48 hours to disclose the problem and propose a solution or face criminal charges. The room went silent. My mother started crying. My father's hands shook as he reviewed the documents. Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to prove I could do it. I wanted to make you proud. The admission might have moved me once, but not anymore." "Here's what's going to happen," I said, taking control of the room I'd once begged to be heard in. "Phoenix Consulting will partner with you to fix this mess. We'll handle the technical remediation, negotiate with Yamamoto, and ensure compliance going forward. In exchange, you'll pay our full rate, plus a crisis management premium, and you'll sign a public statement acknowledging our role in resolving the situation." But there was more. "I also want Marcus to step down from operations. He can keep his title, keep his salary. I don't care. But he doesn't touch another project. He's creative. Let him handle marketing or design or something that doesn't involve safety and specifications." My father started to protest, but I cut him off. "Those are my terms. Accept them or handle this yourself." They had no choice. Marcus actually looked relieved as he agreed to the reassignment. He admitted he'd never wanted to be in operations, that he'd felt pressured to take over the family business because he was the son. He'd rather be designing architectural elements than calculating load bearings. The golden boy who could do no wrong had been miserable trying to be something he wasn't. We worked around the clock for 5 days straight. I negotiated with Mr. Yamamoto personally, taking full responsibility for the errors while presenting a comprehensive remediation plan. George led the technical team, replacing every piece of substandard material. Amy coordinated with lawyers and inspectors to ensure complete compliance. We saved the project, the company, and possibly my parents from bankruptcy. The bill for our services was $800,000. My father signed the check without complaint. The public statement went out the next day announcing the successful partnership between the two companies and praising Phoenix Consulting's expertise in crisis resolution. Every major construction firm in the state read between the lines. We'd just established ourselves as the company you called when things went wrong. 6 months after being fired, I was earning more than I'd ever made working for my parents. Phoenix Consulting had 15 employees and a waiting list of clients. We'd moved to a larger office, though still across the street. Every morning I could see my old parking spot from my new corner office, the one with the view I'd been promised but never received. Marcus found his place in the creative side of the business, finally freed from the pressure of being something he wasn't. He started therapy, working through years of being pushed into a role that never fit. During one of our professional meetings, he broke down and gave me the apology I'd never thought I'd hear. "I knew you were better at this than me," he said, his voice raw with honesty. Every day I went to work terrified they'd figure out I had no idea what I was doing. But Mom and Dad had such expectations. The son carries on the family business, right? That's how it's supposed to work. I'm sorry I let them use me to hurt you. I'm sorry I went along with it because it was easier than standing up to them. It didn't erase the pain or undo the damage, but it helped me understand. We'd both been trapped by our parents' assumptions, their rigid ideas about gender and succession. The difference was, their cage had been golden for him, while mine had been iron. He'd been crushed by expectation, while I'd been crushed by dismissal. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation I wasn't expecting. My mother called, her voice hesitant and formal, asking if I would come to dinner. Just family, she said, though we both knew family meant something different now. I almost said no, but my grandmother would be there, and I wanted to see her. The dinner was awkward but necessary. My father carved the turkey in silence, while my mother overcompensated with chatter about neutral topics. Marcus brought his new girlfriend, an architect who actually understood his artistic vision. She was smart, accomplished, and treated him as an equal partner. I liked her immediately. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. I need to say something. We made mistakes. I made mistakes. I looked at you and saw an employee instead of a daughter. I looked at Marcus and saw a successor instead of a son. We nearly lost everything because I couldn't see past my own assumptions. My mother added her own admission. I was raised to believe sons were special, that daughters were temporary until they got married. I pushed those beliefs onto you both without questioning them. Watching you build Phoenix, seeing what you're capable of when not held back, it's shown me how wrong I was, how much potential I wasted. I appreciated the words, but trust once broken doesn't simply repair itself with apologies. I told them I was willing to maintain a professional relationship and cautiously rebuild a personal one, but it would never be the same. The daughter who desperately sought their approval had died the day they fired me. The woman who'd taken her place didn't need their validation. Phoenix Consulting continued to grow. We specialized in fixing other companies' mistakes, in finding solutions to impossible problems, in bridging cultural and technical gaps that others couldn't navigate. Our reputation spread beyond state lines. We started getting calls from national firms wanting our expertise. I hired more women and minorities people who'd been overlooked and underestimated by traditional construction firms. They brought fresh perspectives and innovative solutions. Our diversity became our strength. Clients started requesting us specifically because we saw problems differently, solved them creatively, approached challenges without the baggage of "this is how it's always been done." A year after starting Phoenix, I was invited to speak at the Women in Construction Conference. Standing at that podium, looking at 200 faces of women fighting their own battles for recognition, I told my story without holding back. I talked about favoritism, about being invisible in your own family's business, about building something from rejection. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of women approached me afterward with their own stories. Daughters pushed aside for sons, wives whose contributions were ignored, female engineers whose ideas were credited to male colleagues. We weren't alone in our struggles, and knowing that made us all stronger. I started a mentorship program pairing experienced women with those just starting out. We created a network of support that extended beyond just business advice. We shared strategies for dealing with discrimination, for building confidence when constantly questioned, for maintaining professionalism when you wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. My relationship with my parents slowly evolved into something functional, if not warm. We had monthly dinners where we discussed business and carefully avoided the past. They'd ask advice about contracts or negotiations, and I'd give it professionally. Marcus and I developed an unexpected friendship, bonding over our shared childhood trauma and our determination to be different than our parents. He flourished in his new role, winning design awards and bringing an artistic elegance to their projects that differentiated them from competitors. He publicly credited me with saving both the company and his sanity. In interviews, he'd say his sister was the real business genius in the family, that he was just the artist making things pretty. 2 years after starting Phoenix, I was named Entrepreneur of the Year by the State Business Journal. My parents attended the ceremony, sitting at a table I'd reserved for them, but not at the head table with me. That spot was for George, Amy, my grandmother, and the chosen family who'd believed in me when my blood family hadn't. In my acceptance speech, I talked about transformation, about how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing. I didn't mention my parents by name, but I thanked them for teaching me that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's recognition, that sometimes you have to build your own table when you're not invited to theirs. After the ceremony, my father approached me. He looked older but also somehow lighter, like releasing his rigid expectations had freed him too. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not because you're successful, but because you didn't let our failures define your future. You became who you were meant to be despite us, not because of us." It was the closest to the acknowledgement I'd always wanted, but it came too late to matter the way it once would have. I thanked him politely and moved on to celebrate with my real supporters. The people who'd stood by me when I had nothing but anger and determination, who'd risked their careers to join an uncertain venture, who'd shown me that family isn't about blood, but about choice. 3 years in Phoenix Consulting had offices in 3 states. We were the firm companies called when they needed things done right the first time, or fixed when others had failed. Our revenue exceeded my parents' company, though I took no satisfaction from that comparison. We weren't competing anymore. We were simply existing in parallel two businesses that shared history but not a future. I dated occasionally but found most men intimidated by my success or frustrated that I wouldn't downplay it to make them comfortable. Then I met David at a conference in Chicago. He ran his own architectural firm and understood the demands of building something from nothing. He celebrated my wins without feeling diminished, challenged my ideas without undermining them, and never once suggested I should be less to make him seem like more. We were equals in ambition and accomplishment partners in the truest sense. He moved to our city after 6 months of long-distance dating, merging his firm with a local partner, so we could build our lives in the same place. He proposed at the groundbreaking ceremony for my new headquarters, understanding that my company was as much a part of me as any ring would be. My parents came to the wedding where they sat as guests, not in the places of honor. Those seats went to George, who walked me down the aisle, and my grandmother, who stood as my officiant. Marcus was there too, genuinely happy for me. Our relationship healed into something real rather than the performance our parents had scripted for us. 5 years have passed since that day they fired me. Phoenix Consulting now employs over 100 people across 5 offices. We've handled projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, solved problems others called impossible, and built a reputation that extends internationally. I wake up every morning excited about work because it's mine, built on my terms, succeeding by my standards. My parents' company still operates smaller but stable, with Marcus handling design, and my father managing operations with a team that actually knows what they're doing. They've learned to hire based on merit rather than connections. The girlfriend who was supposed to replace me lasted exactly 12 days. They never found anyone who could do what I did, but they found several people who could each do parts of it, which taught them the value they'd thrown away. I see them once a month for dinner, where we maintain cordial but careful conversation. They've met their grandchildren, twins that David and I had 2 years ago, but they're not the primary grandparents. That role belongs to my grandmother and David's parents, who showed us what unconditional support actually looks like. Sometimes my mother will start to give parenting advice and I'll stop her with a look. "You don't get to teach me about raising children when you couldn't see the one standing right in front of you." She'll nod and change the subject, understanding that some bridges once burned can only be rebuilt so far. The saddest part is that it never had to be this way. If they'd seen me, really seen me, we could have built an empire together. Marcus with his creative vision, me with my business acumen, working in partnership rather than competition. But their blindness cost them that possibility, and now we're all living with the consequences. I think about the young women entering construction facing the same biases and dismissals I did. That's why I speak at conferences, mentor aggressively, and ensure Phoenix Consulting leads by example. Every woman we promote, every project we complete successfully, every award we win, proves that competence has no gender, that merit should matter more than assumptions. The lessons I've learned are carved into my bones now. Never let anyone else define your worth. Never dim your light to make others comfortable. Never accept less than you deserve because someone claims it's all you're capable of. And most importantly, when someone shows you how little they value you, believe them and build something better without them. Success, I've learned, isn't the best revenge. The best revenge is indifference, is building a life so fulfilling that those who hurt you become footnotes in your story rather than main characters. My parents thought they were teaching me a lesson by firing me, and they did just not the one they intended. They taught me that I didn't need their approval to succeed. They taught me that family isn't always blood, but rather the people who see your worth when others don't. They taught me that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is rejection, because it forces you to discover your own strength. When young professionals ask me for advice, I tell them this: work hard but not for approval. Build your skills, but not to impress others. Document everything, but not out of paranoia. Network constantly, but authentically. And always, always have a backup plan, because the people who should protect you might be the ones who push you off the cliff. But I also tell them about the view from that cliff, how sometimes falling is really flying if you spread your wings at the right moment. How sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted leads you to everything you actually needed. How sometimes the family that rejects you pushes you toward the family that chooses you. My story could have been a tragedy, a cautionary tale about family businesses and favoritism. Instead, it became a triumph, not because I destroyed those who hurt me, but because I built something they couldn't destroy. Phoenix Consulting isn't just a company, it's proof that rejection can be redirection, that pain can be power, that the end of one story can be the beginning of something better. Every morning when I drive to work, I pass that old building where I spent 7 years trying to earn recognition that was never going to come. I don't feel anger anymore, just a sort of distant gratitude. If they hadn't fired me, I'd still be there, still invisible, still accepting less than I deserved. Their rejection freed me to become who I was always meant to be. The irony is that my parents finally see me now that I don't need them to. They brag about their successful daughter to their friends, conveniently forgetting they threw that daughter away. They claim they always knew I'd succeed, rewriting history to make themselves look better. But I know the truth, and more importantly, so does everyone who matters. Marcus sent me a message last week. A simple text that said, "Thank you for saving me from a life that would have killed me slowly." He's happy now, fulfilled in a way he never could have been trying to be me. We both escaped the boxes our parents tried to force us into, though my escape was more violent than his. As I finish writing this story, sitting in my corner office with a view of the city I've helped build, I want to leave you with this thought. Your worth is not negotiable. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who refuse to see your light are doing you a favor by forcing you to shine somewhere else. They thought they were burying me when they fired me that day. What they didn't understand was that I was a seed, and seeds grow stronger when they push through darkness to find their own light. My parents may have planted me, but I chose how to grow, and I grew into something they never imagined possible. The last lesson is perhaps the most important. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Healing doesn't mean returning to what hurt you. Moving forward doesn't mean bringing everyone with you. Sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself, and even for those who hurt you, is to succeed without them, to show them what they lost by your absence, to prove that their biggest mistake was underestimating you. My name is Evelina. I'm 34 years old now, CEO of a company I built from nothing but anger and determination. I was fired by my parents who chose my brother over me, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it taught me that the only approval that matters is the one you give yourself when you look in the mirror each morning and see someone who refused to accept less than they deserved. Have you ever been overlooked or undervalued by people who should have supported you? How did you turn that rejection into your motivation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their current rejection might be tomorrow's redirection. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes being pushed out is really being pushed up. You just have to be brave enough to spread your wings and fly.